guys. So this is going to be the daily look ahead for June 28th, 2022, getting into Tuesday's London and New York sessions. So I'm going to start with the 4 hour. We kind of have a good idea of what's supposed to be happening from the higher time frame. So right now, basically all I'm looking at is that we essentially have this higher time frame bearish order flow that we're obviously in. We have an unconfirmed lower high, but we're expecting this low to essentially get ran at some point. I don't know that we have enough liquidity to push this move higher. As it stands right now, the main thing that I'm sort of interested in is looking at this potential level right here. Again, just with how we've developed over the course of the last few hours and coming off of last night. So right now, if I'm looking at 240 demand resting in this region, the place in which we've essentially broken through that is this little interaction zone that rests in here. And you can see that we've built all sorts of inducement and liquidity just prior to all of this happening. So we can see this on the lower time frame a little bit better. Let me just go like this, 240 supply. So you can see we have tons of liquidity to be able to take in the market. We're going to expect to see some form of a reaction off of this low right here, which is arguably where one of our trades could potentially come from. Just to kind of further that a little bit more, what we'll do is we'll just kind of keep this sitting like that. Okay, so we've basically come up. You can see how weak this break is. We've just to say got a wick. We've actually tapped into supply. We've gotten a really, really good reaction to it. So if we get down onto our lower time frames, you can essentially see what's happening here. So what I'm looking at right now is ideally I'm going to want to see some form of a demand failure on a higher time frame, whether it be this, and then possibly come back up into wherever it is that we want to, build more liquidity to be able to then crash down, and then possibly take this into this demand range right here, and possibly even lower depending on how we react, right? So typically the way that I do things, or how I manage positions, is based off of how we react to the levels. I'll typically look for some sort of a hedge if I'm trading on my personal account, and let this thing hold into higher time frame narrative, potentially taking out the weak low. So it's all going to depend on how we develop a little bit further. But yeah, ideally, with how high we are in price, I am very, very intrigued into looking into some potential sells. Now we've got the initial sort of tap into the zone here, second tap, not quite perfectly, but in and around the regions. We've built liquidity to take, so we've taken all of that by the looks of it, and now it looks like the market is going to want to do its thing and start to plummet into the abyss on euro US dollar. So yeah, again, the ideal setup here would be some form of a break and then possibly a pullback to then be able to play this. Ideally, confirming that this supply should hold, or this supply should hold, depending on how it develops. But yeah, that's essentially what I'm looking to capitalize on over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours. Now, getting over to GBP USD, we have something not quite the same, very similar in how it's developed though. You can see, again, just the interaction zone. We've got this level that just kind of shoots across like this. We've got this wick that we're obviously reacting to. Now, we're not coming up into this supply range as of yet. Doesn't necessarily mean that we need to. We've kind of created this big spike of liquidity grab, and now we're essentially reacting to, like I said before, this little wick right here. We've just kind of been toying with this region for a few days now, even getting into early last week. So I'll just map this out so that we can kind of have an idea of where we're sitting. I believe that's an inside bar or something on a lower time frame. But we'll just keep our little supply region resting like this. Now, right now, again, what you can notice here is that we essentially have this boss, right? That happens right here. It's a weak break, so obviously, in hindsight, it's very easy to say that, this isn't an actual boss. It's just a sweep that comes up and then induces this high. So right now, as it stands, let's just jump onto some lower time frame stuff. yeah, so as it stands right now, you can kind of see a little bit more of the details as to what's sort of happening. It's the reason why we could have potentially gotten involved in trades up here. We've basically broken this structural level. We've come up. We've essentially created a bunch of liquidity to essentially take from the market across these highs, and it looks like that's what we've done. Very difficult to say what's going to happen next. It seems that we are more than likely going to start to roll over. Anything is possible, as you guys know. But if you look, we have a very nice wick break and then an immediate V-shaped recovery, which not only fails a decisional demand, but it also takes out a internal structural low, which obviously gives us a little bit more validity to start to look on the opposing side of the market. So this would be sort of like your confirmation entry, and ideally we might want to play into a double confirmation entry to then take this down into deeper territory, into this liquid region, and possibly beyond these levels into something a little bit lower, and then possibly look for a hedge to play against higher time frame order flow. So as it stands right now, ideally what you're going to want to look for would be a break of structure in this area. Furthermore, start to look for the pullback and look for possible liquidity to take from the market, as well as liquidity to target, depending on how it develops. And then we can start to decipher whether or not this is a valuable area to start looking for lower time frame confirmations. So yeah, this needs to break. At this point, we're not looking to trade long here. We're getting too premiumly priced. Ideally, we'd want to see something come down into here, see some sort of an order flow shift, get it to realign, get double confirmation, and then we can start going after all of this liquidity above here, if and when that sort of happens. So yeah, sells are favorable for me. I've been saying that. I kind of thought that this was going to be the level that was going to do it. Obviously, I was wrong. Not a big deal. Now we just adapt to the market and move forward. Next is gold. Textbook, bearish order flow, sort of coming down now. I would expect to see, this low sort of get broken down here at some point or another, or even this one, and then likely what we'll see is a take on all of this sort of liquidity up here, and potentially look for some sells to align with higher time frame intention after grabbing liquidity pocket that rests right here. So right now, I think the reasonable approach is that technically we are bearish in terms of our trend. We have an unconfirmed, Jesus Christ, a lower high right here until we essentially take out this low, right? So we're just playing internal stuff to hopefully get us on board with what's happening. So if we left something along the lines of this, I'd be a little bit worried about potentially getting involved, just given the fact that, we'd technically be creating demand here. But with that being said, counter order flow, we can look for a 15-minute realignment to potentially come down into these weak areas, because of course expectational order flow is suggesting that these lows are the ones that are going to get taken out in terms of 4-hour structure. So right now, as it stands, there's liquidity built in both directions. So looking underneath here for potential longs at some point, we'll need to see, of course, some sort of structural order flow shift to be able to start looking. But in the short term, looking once we break down here, potentially looking in here to continue downwards. And then furthermore, if and when we take out the low, we could potentially look for an aggressive move coming up into here to sweep liquidity to then come back down and continue in terms of expectational order flow. So yeah, that's it for today's narrative or our daily outlook going into tomorrow. So just be cautious around gold. Let this set up a little bit further. There's a banger of a trade that could potentially be shaping up for us with all this liquidity to take and all this liquidity to target coming underneath here. So just be very cautious of what you want to look for gold. What I would suggest doing is understanding that if we do have liquidity to take from the market and it's above this high, I would say that adding an alert here, set it and forget it, and then just wait for the higher time frame to play through and allow this to line up properly for us. So that's it for today. I will see you guys tomorrow.